It's time to get inside the Giants huddle.
Let's go, back to your hub.
On Giants.com.
Tempo.
And the Giants mobile app.
Go.
Part of the Giants podcast network.
Yeah.
Welcome to the newest edition of the Giants Huddle podcast. Jon Schmeelk with you. It's our game preview featuring 3 interviews. I talked to Giants offensive tackle Nate Solder, not only about the Giants offense, but also about his time playing with Tom Brady in New England. Jon Ledyard from the Pewter Report joins Paul Dottino and Lance Medow to preview the Bucs. And then I talked to Giants head coach Joe Judge. As a reminder, the Giants Huddle podcast can be found on all your favorite podcast platforms, on the Giants mobile app, and on all your favorite podcast platforms. Find the subscribe if you're on Apple Podcasts. Please leave a 5-star positive review if you like what you hear. And if you have friends that are Giant fans you think might enjoy the podcast, make sure you tell them to go check it out. All right, let's start with our player interview. Nate Solder joins me to talk about the Bucs and his time with Tom Brady. Nate, let's start here.
Thank you.
How was the bye week? How'd the guys come back and practice this week?
Yeah, we had some good practices. We got a couple more days to prepare and get ready, and it's going to be a tough opponent on Monday night.
Where do you think the offensive line is now? You know, you guys had, I think, a different starting lineup every game for the first 7-8 weeks of the year, and it seems to have settled in a little bit here. We'll talk about Andrew in a second. Do you feel like the chemistry has gotten continually better over the year as you guys have played together more?
Well, I hate to make summary assessments, but I think we're trending in a good direction. I think we need to continue to work hard at that because that doesn't just come by luck or anything else like that. We have to focus. We got to continue to work hard every day to keep improving.
You know, I throw out that word chemistry like it's a catch-all. When I say chemistry, what does that mean to you as a guy that's actually doing it?
Well, you have to see the game through the same set of eyes. So the way that the guards and the center sees it, the same way the tackle sees it, and the same way the quarterback sees it, and we all kind of work together as one unit to get our job done.
And that's pre and post-snap, right?
That's right. Oh, yeah. Post-snap is just as important because we're reacting to movement, we're blitzes, all those sort of things are constantly happening.
Anything you personally at the bye looked back at and said, after you looked at the first 7-8 weeks of film, I know the coaches kind of go to each player, say, I want you to assess this, reassess that you looked at your tape and said, you know what, these are things that I kind of want to hit on that I think I've either done well or things I want to try to do a little bit better in the second half of the year?
Well, I didn't put on pads for a whole year last year, so I think just that the conditioning, the adjustment, and all that stuff takes time, and so I think I'm going to continue to work at that and continue to get better in that area.
What do you think, now that you've been doing it, what has been the biggest challenge of trying to come back after not playing last year?
I think I've gotten over some of those hurdles. That was like, oh, gosh, I have to put on a helmet. Oh, gosh, my coaches are yelling at me again. Oh, gosh. You know, like some of those just basic human element things.
I'm used to yelling at my kids now. Guys are yelling at me.
Yeah. Most grown people in this world don't get yelled at like you do in the football arena, you know. So some of those things were the adjustment. But it's been great. It's been a great opportunity to have this back.
How much was it putting on the weight again? Because I know you dropped a lot of weight in the offseason. You know, no one's, eating 4,000 calories and, doing crazy bench presses and squats and all that stuff every day. How much of it was that to kind of gain back that same level of strength you had before you took that year off?
Well, it's been an adjustment. Continue to work at it. It's never a finished product, so you keep working. And I'm in the weight room 3 times a week still and trying to gain weight and do everything I can to do the best I can with that.
What would it do for you guys if you have Andrew Thomas back on the field on Monday night?
Well, he's obviously very talented and a crucial part of our team, so getting him worked in there and playing at a high level is the ideal goal here.
Now, you've been around great offensive linemen. What's his ceiling? Like, can he be as good as anyone in the league at tackle?
Well, I sure hope so. I mean, there's so many factors out of our control with that.
Of course.
He's got the right mentality. He's a smart guy. He's a talented guy, so I just wish the best for him and all that.
We had Matt Parrott in here doing this interview a few weeks ago, and he talked to me about how even though you guys were competing in the offseason, you did everything you can to try to mentor him, teach him, make him a better player. Where have you seen Matt grow and improve throughout the year?
Well, that's a big reason for me to be here. I've gained some experience, but most of all, I just want to give some guys perspective and insight on life. I think football is great, but it's also temporary. So if I could just love on these guys and build true, genuine relationships that aren't about performance, that aren't about what I can get from one of these guys, I think that's valuable. I think that could really help them be good players, but also just lead them as men too.
We talked about you personally. Now I'm just talking the offensive line as a unit. Where do you think you guys need to improve on a micro level to be more consistent pass protectors on a macro level, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, if you listen to everyone outside of this building, it's kind of up and down, up and down, up and down, because there's a lot of people that think because you have one good play that dictates everything that you do, or if you have one bad play that dictates everything that you do.
Of course.
So we have good plays and we have bad plays. We need to minimize the bad plays, maximize the good plays, continue to improve, and that every day at practice, every day in our drills, everything that we do has to be the best that we can do it.
And that is one part, right, winning your individual battles, but also two parts, doing everything together, being in sync with your quarterback, your running backs, your tight ends, and it's kind of all that together. Can you explain how all that kind of comes together on a play-by-play basis?
Yeah, sure. There's times where you have to be on an island and you're going to be against one of their best pass rushers, and there's nothing else you can do about it. But there's other times where you can have help from the guard, you can have help from a tight end, you can have help, and you need to know and communicate and trust those guys to be able to do that.
Because it's funny, I've seen sometimes offensive tackles, they have a chip from a running back or a tight end, and sometimes I see it almost mess them up, and they change what they're doing, and then it almost messes up their technique a little bit, right?
That's right. That's all the process of getting on the same page, seeing the game through the same set of eyes, knowing what to expect from your teammates.
Same deal with the running game. When you take a look at how you guys have run block this year, what do you need to continue to get better at to improve to just continue to make that running game more consistent?
Yeah, well, consistency is the key with the run game. If you can get 4, 5, 6 yards every time you run the ball, you got a deadly offense. So if we can get that and we can minimize the negative plays and continue to, like you keep saying, working together, I think that's the key to that.
How much does getting Saquon back maybe change the formula is the wrong phrasing, but make things a little bit different in terms of how explosive you can be and almost how you block some of these plays up? Because I feel like him and Devontae have very different styles.
Yeah. Well, we can't change the way we block things up, but he does have that big play potential in any given play, and he makes those things happen. I mean, that's not something you can predict or almost expect on every given play, but he's going to do it at some point.
Do you guys feel more comfortable right now doing a lot of the zone outside stuff, or are you more comfortable really trying to go downhill and use your power?
Yeah, whatever they call and whatever they draw up, we're going to execute it to the highest of our ability, and that's for sure.
All right, let's talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers then. What makes their run defense so tough? They're ranked second in run categories, yards per play, and all that stuff.
Well, you got some veteran players that know what they're doing, a big, strong, physical group. And then I think Todd Bowles, he puts together a great scheme. I know playing against the Jets for all those years, it was tough to run the ball against those guys, and I think that's an emphasis for them, and they do a good job of doing that.
And then how do you go about trying to identify all the different types of blitzes that they send to make sure you guys are on the same page to handle those?
Well, and they do something different every week, too, so you can't guess what they're going to do. You have to go out there, execute your rules, and keep your eyes open and be vigilant to what they're going to do on that given day.
How about their two perimeter rushers? They're both very good. Obviously, Jason Pierre-Paul you're very familiar with. Shaq Barrett, both very good, but they're also different types of rushers and how they go about their business, right?
Yeah, they're different. They're built differently, but the things that they are similar, they get off the ball fast. They're quick. They play hard. They play long into the play count. They're not stopping, and they're both talented. They're both very natural at getting to the quarterback, and so it's a really challenging thing for us to do.
All right, final topic. Tom Brady, you're around him for a really long time. You see him operate. What is it that separates him from everybody else that makes him special?
Well, I think Tom would agree with this. There's a lot of things that he can't do, but he has been excellent at the things he can do. And I think that's something we could all learn from. We can't do everything, but be good at the things we can do. And he does that to a high, high level. And he was a great teammate. I'm thankful for the friendship and everything that we have. So I'm looking forward to seeing him again.
How does he help protection and an offensive line? Just getting rid of the ball quickly is one, obviously, but everything else that he does too.
Well, and just like Daniel, he knows where the pressure is. He knows where the weak spots are. And then he's going to know he's going to be able to break down the coverages. And so you always feel like you have a step ahead on those sort of things.
And he seems so patient. Like, he's just willing. Like, if you're going to give him 5-yard passes, he's just going to go, all right, fine, bing, 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 bing. Like, you just can't seem to force him into things he's uncomfortable doing. He's just willing to take what the defense gives him, right?
Yeah. And I think that's probably been instilled from the number of years he's played. He sees the ups and downs of any given game, and he knows how to win those games.
Nate, it was always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much for talking to you again.
My
soon.
pleasure. Thank you.
That's Giants offensive tackle Nate Solder. The Delta variant is spreading quickly in all areas of New York State. People who are not fully vaccinated are at greater risk from COVID-19. Protect yourself. Get vaccinated. Visit ny.gov/getvaccinated or talk to your healthcare provider. All right, now let's get an inside look at the Giants' opponent on Monday Night Football, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Jon Ledyard from the Pewter Report joins Paul Dottino and Lance Medow.
Giants are coming off their bye week. First up is a trip to Tampa to visit the 6-3 Bucs, who are in first place in the NFC South. And to get more into Tampa Bay, we're now joined by Jon Ledyard, who covers the team for Pewter Report. John, you got Lance Medow and Paul Dottino here. Greatly appreciate the time today. Hope all is well. How's everything on your end?
Everything's going great. If the Bucs start winning again, it'll be even better. But this feels weird. I mean, for a while there, they weren't losing at all, and now they've lost their last 2 games, and with the bye week in between, they haven't won for like a month, so it'll go a lot better if they can get a victory.
Well, let's get right into that. I'm glad you brought that point up because you look at the numbers, John. In the first 7 games, they had a +7 turnover differential. These last 2 games, it's -4. Brady's got 5 turnovers, and they also have 17 penalties in the last 2 games. Now, I know those things are synonymous with wins and losses, but the fact that you've been watching these games close, how fair is it to say that the turnovers and the penalties have been the key factor as to why they've been on the wrong end of these last 2 games?
Yeah, for sure. No question with the Saints game. I mean, it was obvious. You know, the amount of penalties, the way the turnovers happened, especially, you know, you're talking about the first interception, clear hold on Chris Godwin, uncalled, and because he couldn't get to where he was supposed to be on his route, pass is intercepted. You know, Arians is losing it, but no call, and that would have given the Bucs, you know, it was kind of like it flipped the whole game in some ways because the Bucs were driving to score, and they would have been deep in Saints territory. So that one really changed things. And then, late in the game, obviously that turnover, you know, that happened on the last drive for the Bucs was a killer. But the penalties in between, I mean, literally gifted the Saints, you know, so many yards on a day where they, you know, were just average at moving the football, probably better than they should have been with Trevor Siemian, but still, you know, not great necessarily. They didn't really run the ball that well, and so it was. I mean, penalties just defensively were just absolutely brutal. Then the Washington game, penalties were a factor in the first half, as were 4 drop passes. As were some leaky protection issues. But it went beyond that in the Washington game. The Saints game was like, okay, this was literally everything you could do wrong, and then you were still here at the end against one of the best defenses in the league, still were able to rally back and threw for 375 yards. You know, just it was really still a productive day offensively. It was just those mistakes. But the Washington game, they just played horrible. I mean, both sides of the football, almost every player on the team, on focus, so the penalties were an issue, the drops were an issue, especially in the first half. But even the second half, it wasn't clean. It was the 10.5-minute drive to end the game by Washington. I know there's some injuries for the Bucs defense, but come on. I mean, that kind of stuff. I don't think I've seen them actually play like that. Even going back to that Bears game last year, you know, that game was so unlucky. There were so many bad calls, and there was a lot of injuries that they had more than this game going into it. And so this, I just think it was a Thursday night game. This was probably the worst game I've seen the Bucs play, especially considering the level of competition.
John, before we get to the injury list, and I know there are some significant ones that we do want to discuss, let me go to Bruce Arians for a minute, who's very colorful. We all know that. The media loves this guy because he always gives us something to talk about. But I'm curious to how you think his locker room is reacting to being called a very dumb football team and being told that the stupidity has to go away.
I think you don't really have to worry about that with the Bucs, which is the best part. You know, it's probably one of the strongest locker rooms in the NFL. That was probably true before they won the Super Bowl, honestly. They had a lot of the right guys in place even before Brady got there. And once Brady was there, you know, the standard obviously changed and got even higher at that point. So, yeah, to me, no question that this is a group that's going to stay focused, keep working hard, you know, all the above. You know, they respect the heck out of Arians. I don't think there's any issues in that regard, you know. But, yeah, I mean, when you've won a Super Bowl and you've been, you know, touted as a team that could win it again and has one of the best chances of winning it again and then establishing that kind of a run for a franchise and you lose 2 games, and now if it became more games, you know, you start to wonder how some young guys who are also dubbed as leaders in the locker room will handle that. And so but right now at this point in time, there's no real concerns within the Bucs in terms of culture. It's really strong from that regard.
John, Paul talked about injuries. I want to go there and focus specifically on the ones on the offensive side of the ball. Antonio Brown has been sidelined the last few games. Gronkowski looks like he could return. As we're taping this, he's been a full participant in practice. They haven't really been utilizing Cameron Brate and O.J. Howard much in the passing game. So the potential return of Gronk, what type of an impact do you see in that, and how have they made up for the loss of AB?
Yeah, I think the potential return of Gronk could be really big. You know, the biggest thing, honestly, is Cam Brate and O.J. Howard are not very good blockers, and the Bucs insist on running the football with, usually 2 tight ends on the field. So it makes the whole scheme worse when those guys are out there run blocking. So that's the frustrating part about it. Gronk will help in that regard if he's healthy. As a receiver, this offense runs through the wideouts, but yeah, having Gronk is better than having Brait and Howard for sure. And you even saw early in the season, Gronk might be the first tight end that kind of broke down, maybe other than Heath Miller, but especially recent Bruce Arians. Like, he might be good enough to be the first tight end that kind of broke down Bruce Arians and got the tight end involved in the passing game. Arians, not really like the focal point of his offense typically, but with Gronk, I think that changes with the tight end like that. So yeah, definitely, no question, it's an added dimension for sure. The Antonio Brown thing is much bigger because this team, when they want to be successful as a passing attack, they really need to be able to throw the ball out of 11 personnel with 3 wide receivers. And right now, Tyler Johnson's been okay. He's been fine, but I think he's probably, with this offense, it just requires you to do so much as a wide receiver. I mean, look, everywhere Bruce Arians has ever been, he's just stockpiled wideouts. It's the most important position in his offense other than quarterback. So he really needs wide receivers that can create separation on a consistent basis. And Antonio Brown's one of the best ever to do that. And it just isn't the case for Tyler Johnson. It's a little bit more hit or miss. He's not a great athlete. He's not that big or strong. So there's physical and athletic limitations with him. And he's still in his second year, so there's some learning curve things. First third down of the game, Brady gets drilled, but he puts a ball out there pretty perfectly for Tyler Johnson. And instead of accelerating out of his break, he kind of stretches way too early and tries to one-hand the ball instead of running through it. Little things like that, right? Like Antonio Brown is maybe the best ever in terms of instincts to the wide receiver position. Johnson just kind of lacking that a little bit. So he's been good. I mean, he's been good after the catch. He makes really tough catches on a regular basis, got good ball skills, good hands. But that extra little bit of separation and ability to get open, especially when Mike Evans is running your vertical routes and teams are playing with the safety high and trying to take away vertical plays. And, Chris Godwin becomes your heavy volume guy. And then when he's not 100%, as he wasn't last week, the wide receiver 3 issues get amplified. So Brown coming back is huge for the Bucs offense, in my opinion.
John, before we get to defense, I've got to ask you about Leonard Fournette, who seems to be running the ball rather effectively when he gets a chance. And I think that's an important phrase to utter because the Bucs run the ball fewest or lowest percentage of any team in the National Football League because we all know that Arians is that no risk it, no biscuit, or whatever the heck he likes to call it, and wants to throw the ball down the field. So what are your impressions of their run game? Do they need to be more patient with it and utilize it more if they're going to get back on track?
No, not at all. The amount that they run is actually perfect. It's a big reason why they've been as successful as they've been is that they don't waste a lot of plays trying to find a run game that's never going to be there. And for, 30, 29, 28 teams in the league, it's never going to be there at that level. A lot of other teams waste a lot of plays trying to find a run game that's never going to equal the success of even an adequate passing game in terms of their win-loss percentage. So the Bucs do a great job of avoiding a ton of those plays. What they do poorly with it is they call most of their runs on first downs, and so they're the pass-heaviest team in the league on second down. So what they need to do is pass more on first down, and that will set them up and get them in better position to run more on second down. So it's not about passing more or running more or doing one of those things less. To me, it's more about doing it in better situations. On first down, defenses are automatically kind of usually structured and leaning toward running or run defense, depending on how you come out as an offense with your personnel grouping. So if you can find a way to play action and throw on those downs, then on second downs, get yourself, okay, now you got 7 yards, just 7 yards on first down. Okay, now 2nd and 3, our whole playbook's wide open. We could run it and probably get this first down. Bucs are averaging 4.3 yards per attempt this season. That's 16th in the NFL. That's great for them. That's terrific efficiency for them. So it's not about running it more for the Bucs, just about better situations when they're running the football, less predictable situations. When they're able to run in those spots, they can really gash teams. The scheme has been really diversified this year. They were just pretty much a duo scheme team, and now they're out there pulling guys and running counter and running outside zone and pitch a crack toss, and there's all kinds of elements are being added into the run scheme, making it really a lot harder to prepare for them, especially when most teams spend a lot of time preparing to stop their passing attack. So the efficiency, the fact that it's been better in the run game is key for the Bucs. They don't need to run it more. They just need to redistribute some of the run pass things that they have going on and throw more on first down, run more on second down.
We're talking with Jon Ledyard, who covers the Bucs for a Pewter Report. John, let's flip the script to the defensive side of the ball. Speaking of the run-pass balance, Bucs are number 2 against the run, but 22nd against the pass. And I want to focus on the secondary because the injuries came fast and furious at the beginning of the season. Carlton Davis, they lose. Sean Murphy-Bunting, I know he's trying to work his way back. How much has the loss of those two guys in particular impacted what Todd Bowles can do on the back end? And how much have they really been relying on sort of a game of musical chairs back there because they brought in Richard Sherman? He's hurt. There hasn't been a lot of continuity on the back end of this defense. How fair is that?
Yeah, I think that it has been tricky. The Bucs starting secondary has not played a single snap together this season. So that's an issue, definitely. The talent level has obviously been somewhat of a drop-off. Now, on the flip side of it, they have played pretty pathetic passing offenses for the last 5-6 weeks. They really have not played any great quarterbacks or great passing offenses or anything like that, which has helped them. They actually, coming out of week 3 of the Rams game, they were dead last in the NFL in pass defense. Now, part of that was the volume. They were just getting thrown at an absurd amount. I mean, no one was even really trying to run the ball against them. It was ridiculous. And really, still, that's kind of the case. It's definitely come back the other way a little bit. Washington ran it a lot, ran it very unsuccessfully, but they ran it a lot. I think they averaged like 2.4, 2.5 yards per carry, but ran it like 34 times on designed runs. So they wasted – that was another crazy part of the Washington game. They wasted so many plays, and yet still were able to be 11 of 19 on third down. That just does not happen very often. Bucs were really, really bad in those situations. It's definitely a concern. You could see it in the Washington game too. Like, guys' ability to cover was definitely a reason for a lot of completions down the field. Not a lot of guys with very good coverage skills. They also only ran man coverage 5 times in the Washington game. So it just shows you they're trying to play in zone. They're trying to keep everything in front of them. That's always how Bowles has played, though. So I don't know that he's changed a ton schematically. I think he would vary it up maybe a little bit more with other guys. The biggest issue with the Bucs pass defense is that they still are ascribed to spot dropping in zone coverage most of the time, and when they're in coverage, and it makes life easy for opposing quarterbacks. Everybody can figure out a spot dropping defense. If you're cover 2, you know where guys are going to be if they're just spot dropping every play. So the Bucs really need to do more pattern matching and more basically manning up out of zone looks. Depending on how the routes are. I think that's been hard for them to do because of a lot of the injuries. So I do think it'll help some when they get those guys back, but I don't think Carlton Davis is going to play this week. Sean Murphy-Bunting probably will play, but I don't know how much or whether he'll just play in the slot or whether he'll just play outside. He's typically done both for the Bucs. I don't know what that's going to look like for him, but they are really down to just right now. I mean, there are 3 corners right now. I mean, if Sean Murphy-Bunting gets activated, he's one. If Bleedy Ray Wilson comes up in the practice squad, he's another one. So that would be their 5. But they only have basically Ross Cockrell, Pierre Desir, and Jamel Dean right now healthy. And then Mike Edwards actually stepped in from safety and played in the slot most of last game. Cockrell only played 9 snaps. So he may be your slot guy again if you're the Bucs, and you'll see how much Sean Murphy-Bunting can do. I really don't know, but they are kind of running out of bodies there, and it's definitely affecting things.
All right, John, I know we're running out of time, so let me go to the front 7. You got your 2 edge guys in Barrett and JPP, but JPP's been banged up. Maybe the timeline is finally starting to catch up on him because the injuries have mounted a long ways during the course of his career. And obviously David and White, the 2 linebackers, have been terrific. Vita Vea, though, now missing because of that knee injury. So how about a thumbnail capsule on that front 7?
Yeah, I'd say the Vea injury, it looks like he probably won't play this week would be my guess. We'll see, but probably not this week and then maybe back the next week. But this week, if he's out. Now, here's the thing. They lost Vea last year, and it affected their pass rush some for a while, but the run defense remained number 1 in the league throughout the rest of the season, and they finished the year first in the NFL, too. So they have guys who can stuff the run, Steve McClendon, Raheem Nunez-Roches, Ndamukong Suh, Will Goldston. They're still going to be good in that regard. Linebackers, Levante David's been banged up a little bit this year. Hopefully the splash plays come back with him. We saw the strip at the end of the Washington game. That was a good sign for him. He's been playing a little bit better recently, so we'll see. Devin White has been a total seesaw this year. It's anyone's guess. He could make the 3 worst plays and the 3 best plays of the game for the Bucs defense on Monday night. So we'll see how that goes. But, yeah, the big thing, Shaq Barrett, Jason Pierre-Paul, those guys have to get better. They have to be more productive than they've been the last couple weeks. And Pierre-Paul especially, the body is falling apart a little bit, and if he can't go at the rate that he needs to go, they got to play Joe Tryon-Shoyinka more. First-rounder, super talented, flashed a lot, but they're just not giving him any opportunities right now.
John, before we let you go, one number that's jumped out to me is the fact that the Bucs' performance at home versus on the road has been very different this year. They're 4-0 at home, 2-3 on the road. Brady's numbers look much more impressive. Is there anything to read into that, considering this game is going to be a home game for the Bucs, or are those numbers just playing out that way because of the opposition in terms of who's visited them and who they've gone to?
Yeah, I really don't know, to be honest with you. I don't understand the road thing and the split and all that. To me, like, in my mind, that should not affect things like this. Like, it shouldn't affect things like to this degree with a team that, veteran team, they have lots going. I just don't understand why that split has happened. I don't know that it's something I can quantify from my, 1,000-foot, perch or whatever. Like, I just can't really see it to that degree. So I guess we'll just have to find out and watch and see if it comes back the other way. Crowd noise probably has affected them at some point in the season, but there's a lot of guys who played a lot of football. I don't know if that's been a part of it. That's a big part of it or not. I think they're really just not playing that consistent football right now, and that needs to be something that changes, especially when it comes to penalties. And lately, turnovers, that's not something I expect to continue. Brady's still near the bottom of the league in turnovers and turnover-worthy plays. A lot of his turnovers have been just totally unlucky this season. So I don't think that part's going to continue, but the penalties, that's been an issue for 3 years under Arians, so they've got to get that under control.
Hey, John, just to cover all our bases, one-word answer, Tom Brady's still pretty good. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, elite. No question about it, elite. Yeah. People overreact. He's elite.
Yeah.
Absolutely, which means the Giants defense certainly will have its hands full on Monday night. He is Jon Ledyard, who covers the team for Pewter Report. John, always good talking with you. Greatly appreciate the time and the insight, and we're looking forward to Monday night's game. Thanks again.
Thanks, John.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
That's Jon Ledyard, friend of the podcast, joining us from the Pewter Report. Great insight into the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And, of course, keep an eye on those injury reports as we move forward towards the game on Monday night. Could be some game-time decisions in there. Hey, Giant fans, secure your season tickets for the 2022 season today for only $100. Limited seats are available. Speak with the Giants ticket representative now and become a season ticket member by calling 888-NYG-1925. All right, now it's time for our weekly chat. Here's my conversation with Giants head coach Joe Judge. Coach, let's start here. Team's coming off a bye. How'd they come back? How'd they look on the practice field? How'd they work this week?
Yeah, a lot of good energy this week. Obviously, that week was critical for a lot of the young guys to get extra work, some extra coaching, and then obviously a lot of these older guys, get some rest. The self-scout's always critical for us this time of year to make sure we go in, not only see, what tendencies schematically we've got to go ahead and break or take advantage of, but then also just go back and reflect on the fundamentals and, each person's development, it's as a player and a coach, and make sure that, this back end of the season, we focus on a couple of specific things we can improve on. So it's a good week to identify that for the players and for us as coaches so we can work going forward.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting when you spoke to the media last week about how the self-scout almost has two parts, right? It's what you guys as a coaching staff can do differently, but then what you communicate to the players from a personnel perspective, what they can do differently. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we try to always give every player two specific things. In some cases maybe it's three, but really two things that they can work on a daily basis. It may be somebody, a defensive back, and say, you really got to work on your footwork at the line of scrimmage, or maybe it's your, eye control in zones. Offensive line, maybe it's pad level, strike, hand placement, whatever it may be, but give them specific things, and then also tie into that their film work going from training camp through the season so they can see either how it's progressed or regressed in some cases, and then always go ahead and show them, some evidence of what it's supposed to look like, whether it's league examples or historic examples of guys that have done it at a high level and people that kind of fit their, similarities as a player and skill set. So you want to give them something they can work on, that they come on out, and that way they can see themselves progress.
All right, you have a couple guys trying to come back from injury, Saquon Barkley, Andrew Thomas, Sterling Shepard among them. How'd they look in practice this week?
You know what? They went out there and they did some good things. Andrew did a good job really getting back involved with some contact drills. We had the pads on that looked good and encouraging with him right there. It was moving throughout the week, continued to increase and progress in a positive way, really trending the right way. Saquon had a good week. He's been with the trainers for some time, really that week missing with the COVID protocols. I say set him back more in terms of took him out of the building, and all of a sudden, that kind of limits your ability to get him back the following week. But he's worked hard to come back. He's looked good in practice. we'll see how those guys go leading up to the game right now.
You and your staff have always talked about how you build your game plans and what you like to do around the players that are available to you. So that obviously giving away game plan details. How much do getting some of these guys back, and even before the bye, getting Kenny back, Kadarius getting healthier, how does that change and add to the variety of things that maybe you can do offensively?
Yeah, absolutely. To me, it always starts with the menu of the people and who's available. And then you can talk about schematically where you want to try and take advantage of somebody else. But ultimately, it's, who do we like best on what routes? How can we go and isolate a certain matchup and get someone to a position where they can just go ahead and win a one-on-one battle? So when you get different guys back, it obviously gives you variety in terms of what you want to do. And whether it's a different back, different receiver, it gives you a little bit of a broader menu going into the game with the skill sets. Obviously when some guys aren't available, that may limit some things. You just got to make sure that you expand it, based on who's available and what they do well to add to the team.
Obviously, I'm sure you're tired of answering this question, but I'll ask you one more time. You were up close with Tom Brady. What makes him special?
The way he works and prepares. And that's really I think that's the difference really in any player at this level. Everybody's talented, okay? Everybody has a skill set that can, get them to this level. I think when you get to the NFL, it's all about how you work to stay in the league and make an impact. And obviously, it's not by accident that you play in your mid-40s, at such a high level. And that comes into how he's prepared, how he's executed consistently over years, but then also how he recovers and takes care of his body off the field, which is much more of a commitment than a lot of people, account for. You talk about a lot of these guys have always been the best athletes in every team they've ever been on. You're 22, 23 years old coming in this league, and you just take for granted your body recovers. So to get to that age group where you're in your mid to upper 30s and even in the 40s in Tom's case, you've got to start putting that work in at a young age. So to be able to play at this age, it's not really a reflection of what he's done the last couple of years. It's a reflection of what he's done for the last 20 years.
The one thing that's really struck me watching him over the years is that he can beat you in so many different ways based on how you play him. If you play not a lot of safeties back, he'll happily take the big play. But if you play deep, he will dink and dunk you 4 and 5 yards for touchdowns left and right. So how hard is it to prepare for a guy that always seems to have an answer and is willing to do whatever it takes based on what you're throwing at him? And you're smiling because you know it.
Well, you got to try to change it up on him a little bit. And look, Tom is extremely patient. And when I say that, I mean he's patient in terms of taking what the defense presents. So, again, if you're playing close to the line, he'll look for the advantage shot down the field. If you're playing everybody back, he'll take, the catch and runs underneath. And he's going to take what the defense gives you repeatedly. You've got to execute. The key of playing a guy like Tom isn't to try to go ahead and change how Tom plays. It's to affect everybody around Tom and really limit his menu. Now, that being said, he elevates the play of everybody around him by distributing the ball. And again, I go back to that word patience. That's something that always shows up with me with Tom. It doesn't always show in how competitive he is on the field, but it's how he executes, and he's willing to go, tick, tick, tick down the field and keep moving those sticks and keep you at bay on the sideline. So that's just the way he plays. We kind of talked to the guys before. He's kind of, like Top Gun is kind of ice cold in terms of when he goes on out there, and you just be patient yourself and stick to the game plan.
Your team and your defense the last 3 weeks have not allowed more than 20 points. We know Bruce Arians wants to take big shots down the field, but I think one thing your defense has really improved at over the year, coach, is you haven't been giving up as many of those big chunk plays. You're keeping things in front of you. When you go up against a team like Tampa Bay, what are some of the things that you think you've done well that have allowed you to prevent those big plays that you can try to carry into this week?
Well, you got to tackle. It starts out with tackling, and really you think about the big plays over top, but really where they really hurt you is systematically taking the quick gains and then turning a short completion into a bigger gain, whether it's a screen, a check down, a run. You have to do a good job tackling. It starts with the backs. These are strong backs. Fournette, you got to put a shoulder on this guy, and you got to wrap up, and you got to work to stop, yards after contact. And this guy does a really good job playing through contact. Start talking about the Gronkowskis and, Godwin and all those guys. They do a really good job of extending plays through the contact and playing. Those guys are on the inside part of the field especially, the running backs, slot receivers, tight ends. Those guys have to be good with yards after contact, and they've got 3 very, very good ones right there. And then, obviously, you got to talk about, the shot plays down the field. And you talk about Evans on the perimeter. A lot of things show up in the fringe and red area. And then also, off the play action. So if they're hurting you with the run, you've got to overextend your defense to really pack the box. That's when the play action comes in and gets an isolated matchup down the sideline. So you really want to make sure you start everything out with stopping the run, making the other team one-dimensional. And I think a key part of this game for us is really tackling, space play.
As of this recording, we don't know about Logan Ryan's status yet, but I imagine communication probably is a real big key, right, to preventing those types of big plays. Is that something you think your team has improved a lot at over the course of the year?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of that's just getting those guys out there and playing together as a unit. But obviously Logan's done a tremendous job of communicating for us. But the thing about communication is everyone's got to be communicating for it to be effective. So, whether Logan's available or not, we depend on everybody else to communicate across the board. And we tell them all the time, someone's always giving communication, someone's receiving communication. So it's a two-way street. And then you got to make sure you echo everything. Xavier McKinney, Julian Love, these are guys that have worked at these positions. We practice intentionally in terms of moving bodies around and sometimes taking out some of the dominant single callers. Like a Blake Martinez when he was healthy, a Logan Ryan and Nate Ebner. At different times, guys on the offense to make different people have to speak and speak up and make sure we get all on the same page. So communication is one of the most critical things you have to work on in this game, especially playing against a team like this who presents so many multiples and how they're going to attack you. You've got to make sure that if you're working with the skies, if you're working with certain matchups, you've got to all be on the same page.
And then defensively for them, does everything start with their ability to stop the run?
Well, I think the front period. It's they stop the run, they keep you behind the sticks, and then they pin your ears back and they rush you. And that's a pretty good formula. And what this team does as a whole is they play from ahead. And you heard Tom in the press conference before about playing on our terms, and what he's referring to is the formula a lot of teams have is start fast in the game, get ahead, make the other team feel behind, abandon the game plan, start throwing. And when you're in a throw game, in comes the interior pressure, the blitzes, the fire zones, things of that nature. It really puts pressure on you. Leads to mistakes. This is one of the top turnover teams out there as well. They really put pressure on the ball, and that comes from putting you in a position where you feel you have to play catch up consistently throughout the game. To me, a key element of that is you got to be committed to your game plan and understand you got to grind it out and keep plugging away, to stay with it and play on your terms. But when you talk specifically about their defensive front, they do such a tremendous job of stopping the run. That opens up their pass rush, and obviously their skill sets to rush the pass are elite.
And then finally, pre and post snap. They're a team that blitzes a lot, second highest blitz rate in the league, only behind the Dolphins, and they're neck and neck. They swap every week, and they disguise their coverages. So what are the keys for your offensive line, your quarterback, and your receivers to work together to try to counteract that combination, which, as you just mentioned, can turn into a lot of mistakes?
Well, everyone's got to be on the same page in terms of how we're trying to play each playing situation. You talk about, getting the run game going, and you got to be committed to going ahead and showing that you will run the ball. And whether it's explosive runs or dirty runs where you're just continuously plugging away, you've got to present them with the threat of a run to make sure they have to respect that. And then in the pass game, you've got to execute all 11 on the same page. And that's comes down to how you protect it inside out to keep the pocket clean. The quarterback's got to be on time with the throw, and the receivers have to get open and catch the ball. And when it's tight press coverage or it's match zone, as we'll play a lot of times, you've got to work to really defend the leverage and get open fast. And then the accuracy of the pass, and obviously going back to the front part we talked about immediately, the protection is all key. So it's not one person's job. It's not one aspect of the game. You've got to make sure you play complementary football. But on the offense, in terms of really negating what they do well, you've got to play all on the same page. And you got to be able to operate quickly when you have to get the ball out fast, and then make sure you can set up the shots down the field by making them respect the run.
Coach, best luck against Tampa Bay.
I appreciate it.
That's Giants head coach Joe Judge taking all the action of Giants football with your very own private suite. Suites are a great way to entertain the family and friends while rooting on your Giants at MetLife Stadium. Speak with the Giants suite representative now by calling 888-NYG-1925. We thank Nate Solder. We thank Joe Judge. We thank Jon Ledyard for joining us on this episode of the Giants Huddle Podcast, our game preview for Giants and Bucs on Monday Night Football. For everybody, I am Jon Schmeelk. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time on the Giants Huddle.